So in this video, we want to look at rate of change and slope. Even though both of them have a relationship, but they are not the same. But I'll be expressing rate of change with respect to y and x. So what is average rate of change? Average rate of change is change in y divided by change in x. That change could either be positive or negative. So change in y is delta y and change in x is delta x. We can still further rewrite this particular formula this way. I can still simplify further to give me what? Y2 minus what? Y1 over what? X2 minus what? X1. Okay. Now this is what will now lead us to what I call slope, also known as gradient. Now when we're talking about slope, or gradient, right? The slope of a line, basically, the slope of a line through point x1, comma y1, and what? And x2, comma what? Y2 is given by m, which is equal to what? Change in y over what? Change in x. So this one will now give us what? Y2 minus what? Y1 over what? X2 minus what? X1. So which is the same thing as rise over what? Over run. Now let me explain something to us. The fixing of y2 and y1 and x2 and x1 is dependent on the type of graph. We do not just plug in the value of y2 and y1 and assume that we'll get the slope, because we are not actually calculating distance between 2 points. So now, how do we now know where to plug in the value of y2 and y1 and x2 and x1, to get what we are looking for? So this will now lead us to the types of slope. So I'll quickly look at these types of what? Of slope. So when we're talking about types of slope, for a linear graph, we have 4 major types of slope. We have the positive slope, we have the negative slope, we have the zero slope, slope, and lastly we have the what? Undefined slope. I did a video previously that talks about this, but this is a special topic. That's why I have to treat it again here. So let's quickly pick the positive and negative slope. So when we say positive slope, let's say we have a line like this. Okay, let's say we have a line like this. I getting it? And let's say we have a graph on that line that goes like this. So this is our y, or let's say positive y, and this is our x. This is positive what? X. The slope of this line is a right triangle that will face the right hand side. So the slope of this graph is here. So this is the slope. So this is what? Your change in y, and this is your change in x. Now for a positive slope, now I'm actually explaining positive slope. So for a positive slope, this is positive slope that I'm trying to explain here. So for a positive slope, your change in y slope, which is what? Change in y over what? Over change in x, right, is greater than 0. Any number greater than 0 is positive. Now the question is, how do I know where is my y2, where is my y1? This side of the graph is your y2, meaning that you are going to trace it to y-axis. Then this side of the graph is your what? Y1. You trace it to this side of the graph, okay, because of course there will be certain numbers here, right? Then here is your what? X2. This is y2, y1, x2, and here is your what? X1. So you trace this down and you trace this down. So if let's assume we have values for this, it will definitely give us a positive slope. So this is what? Y2 minus y1 over what? X2 minus what? X1. So let me just plug in values. Let's say this is Let's say this is 2. Let's say this is 10, because this is positive axis. Let's say this is another what, 2, and let's say this is what, 8. So y2 minus y1, what is my y2? Y2 is what, 8 minus y1. What is y1? That is what, 2. Then over what, x2, that is what, 10 minus what, x1. And x1 in this case is what, 2. So at the end of it, we have 8 minus 2. And 8 minus 2 will give us what, 6. And 10 minus 2, that is what, 8. So at the end of it, 6 minus, divided by 8 will give us 0.75. This is 0.75. Or 2 in 6, 3. 2 in 8, 4. So this is our slope. And you can see that 0.75 is greater than 0, which makes it what? Positive. Now, let me explain something further before I move on. Irrespective of the axis of the graph, as long as the right triangle you are drawing is towards the right hand side, you can check one of the videos where I explain slope. The slope will always be positive, meaning that if your graph is negative graph, let me show you an example of such graph. Maybe we have a graph, like this. Let me just put it. Okay, I'm coming. Let's say you have a graph like this. Okay, I'm coming. This is negative y. And let's say this is what, negative what, x. Okay, so I'm trying to bring something. This is negative what, x. This is what, negative y. And if your graph should be like this, the graph is actually plotted on negative what axis. Your slope, your right triangle for your slope will be here. So this particular right triangle here will actually still give you a positive slope, irrespective of the fact that your graph is what, a negative axis graph. How do I mean? So let's put some values. Let's say this is what, minus 2 here, and let's say this is minus 8. So just for illustration purpose, right? Okay, or maybe let me extend. Okay, let's leave it that way. Then let's say this is also minus what, minus 2, and this is what, minus 8. You can see that all the values are negative, but I'm assuring you that this slope is going to be positive. So let's label it. This is still what, y2. This is what, y1. This is what, x2. This is what, x1. So y2, so slope in this case is what, change in y over what, change in x, which is what, y2 minus y1 over what, x2 minus what, x1. So what is y2? y2 is minus 2 minus what, y1 minus what, minus 8. Then over x2. x2 you take it up. That is minus 2 minus what, x1 minus what, minus 8. So if you look at it, minus 2 minus times minus, that is plus. Minus 2 plus 8, that will give us 6. Minus 2 minus minus is minus times minus, that's plus. Minus 2 plus 8, that is what, 6. 6 cancels 6. So the slope is 1, which is greater than 0, which shows that the slope is still what, positive. I've just used that, for the purpose of illustration. All right, so that is that about that. Now, let's now move on to negative slope. So let's move on to negative slope. So negative slope, for negative slope, the graph that will produce a negative slope, the line is always like this. So this is negative, slope. So the graph that will produce a negative slope, the line is always like this. Okay, I'm coming. So this is how the graph will look like. This is how the graph. So if you want to draw your right triangle, your right triangle will be towards the left hand side. Okay, to be towards the left hand side. So this is a right what? This is a right triangle. So now that you have your right triangle, you can label this. This is your what? y2. Excuse me. This is your y2. This is what? y1. This is x2. And this is what? x1. So your slope, which is changing y over what? Changing x, is less than 0. That is negative. Now let's see how it's gonna be negative. So like I did in the first one, we can plug in some values. So let's say this is 8. Let's say this is what? 4. So let's say this is also 4. Let's say this is what? 8. So you can say that what? Slope, right, is got to change in y over what? Change in x. So what is a y2? That is 8 minus y1. That is what? 4. Right, over x2, that is 4 minus x1, that is what? 8. So 8 minus 4 will give us 4. 4 minus 8 will give us minus 4. And minus 4 divided by minus 4, that is minus 1. That which is what? Less than what? 0. So I want to believe this video has helped someone. Like I did in this other one too, even irrespective of the axis of the graph, right? If you have of course, this is a positive axis graph, it still give you a negative slope. So the axis of the graph does not determine the nature of the slope, but the side in which the right triangle is facing, that determines the type of slope you have. So let me quickly explain zero slope. So when you have a graph like this, and the point you plotted is in a straight line like this, right? This will produce your slope here, which is change in y over what? Change in x will be equal to 0. So if your plotted point is a straight line, that is what you see in a velocity time graph where you have a constant velocity. In that case, the slope in that region, which is acceleration, will be equal to what? 0. So for this particular type of graph, the slope will be what? 0. So that's why I said, so it's a zero slope is often formed by horizontal what? Line. Then after zero slope, we now have the undefined slope. So undefined what? Slope. So when we say undefined slope, this is the kind of slope you have in a graph like this, right, where you have a vertical line. So this is your plotted point. Your plotted point forms a what? Vertical line. So in this case, your change in y over change in x is equal to what? Undefined. Undefined means that it cannot, be determined. I want to believe that this video has helped someone, and if this video has really been a help to you, please kindly subscribe to this channel, like, share, and comment. I'll be looking forward to having you in the next video. See you in the next video. Thank you.